Hi everybody, we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of a follow-up here to our listing presentation training session that we did last week. This is the part that we did at the very end for those of you who stuck around and for those of you who didn't. It's a look at how you can use your MLS system and Excel to determine some of your statistics versus some of the statistics of the people that you compete with in your marketplace. And this is just a little trick that I've used for a long time. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to download all of the transactions that have happened in a specific time period and use it to do some analysis in Excel. So it is a little bit advanced in the Excel world, but I think I'll be able to walk you through it, and you'll have this video to work off of as you go forward. So like I said, I'm in the MLS, the matrix system here, and then I also have Excel here, and I just need a blank worksheet for Excel. So I'm going to go ahead and just launch one of those. And we're going to work on these two documents so that we can do a little bit of analysis, like I said. So what you do is you just do a little bit of a residential search here. And in this case, I want to see sold properties. I want to see people's results for what they've sold. I would suggest that for the most part, you want to do either year to date or all of last year or all of a quarter, because it's hard to get real valuable statistics in any time period shorter than that. But just for the sake of ease, I'm just going to go ahead and do the last 30 days worth of sold properties. And I'm just going to pick the St. John area, and that's going to give me 89 matches. So there's been 89 properties that have sold in the last 30 days in that market area, that board area. And all I want to do is I want to go ahead and call up the results for that. So this will look pretty similar to what most of you would see when you got through a similar type of exercise. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have the data here that I'm going to go ahead and pull down and put into my spreadsheet that I'm going to be using to do the real analysis for us. So in this case, this is a pretty standard look. You can go ahead and see your photos, etc., etc. But I need some new columns in here that aren't in here. The first thing is that I'm looking at sold data, and I only have list prices. So I want to go ahead and insert the sales price column. So I'm going to go ahead and include that. There's the sales price, so I'm going to go ahead and apply, and that's going to be there. And all I'm doing here is clicking on these to insert a new column. And like I said, what we want to do is we want to compare ourselves with our customers, our competitors. So I want to add in a few columns as well so that I can see who are doing these trades on each of these transactions. So you can actually do that by go ahead and just typing in listing, and you can get the listing company, or you can go ahead and scroll down and you can get the listing salesperson. And we want the listing salesperson one name. So now I insert that, and you can see these are the listing agents on all of these sold properties. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and insert the selling salesperson name. So if I go ahead and say selling, it's going to take me down, and I can find the selling salesperson name one, and go ahead and apply that. And now I have the listing salesperson and the selling salesperson. So for today, all we're going to do is stats on the listing side of these transactions. But if you ever wanted to do the same type of analysis for the people who are on the buyer side, representing the buyers of these transactions, it's very easy to go ahead and enter in all those names. They already exist in our system, so we can go ahead and take them. So the last thing I want to do is I want to delete some of these columns, just because I'm going to go ahead and put this into a spreadsheet, and I don't want all of this data to come down. So just going to go ahead and tidy this up a little bit before I go ahead and download all this information. Number of beds, number of baths, days on market, cumulative is, I'll leave that in there even though I'm not going to use it. But I do want to take out some of these columns where I have the graphic images of things. That's just not going to help me at all here. So remove that column, remove that last column. So I mentioned in our session that there is a difference between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. Just before I get onto that, I'm going to just change this. Instead of 25 results, I want to pull 100 results. And of course, we know we only have 89 because that was the number that we came up with when we first did the search. So back to the difference between the two provinces. In Nova Scotia, it's easy at this point. All I need to do is hit a button, and this gets automatically, all this information gets automatically downloaded into an Excel spreadsheet. In Nova Scotia, your boards haven't turned that on yet. that ability to do so. So we actually have to go ahead and scrape the data off of this page now. And by scrape it, I just mean I'm going to cut and paste the data off of this. So I'm just going to highlight all of the data, just like you would highlight anything in Word or Excel or anything like that. I'm going to copy it, so I'm going to hit Control-C. You could also right-click and hit Copy. And this is where I'm going to go ahead and go over to my Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to drop this information on line 2 of my spreadsheet. So paste it, Control-V, or I could have right-click and pasted it, and you'll see that often this first line gets offset. So I want to go ahead and just move that over one so that we have nice, tidy, clean columns with all the information that I'm looking for. The last thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and add the headers that I'm going to be keeping track of. So I want to go ahead and try and highlight those. And let's see if I can do this. It's always a little tricky because you're trying to highlight stuff that, yeah, see, I caught the stuff up top there. So I don't want that. So here we go. So now I've got the column headers that I'm going to just, again, Control-C or right-click and copy. And I'll come over to my Excel spreadsheet and I'll paste them in here so that we know. And of course, I did it one too far to the right because it was offset. And so I know that these are the MLS numbers, these are the types, etc., etc. And I don't need this first column here, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And now I have good data to work with over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and minimize over here the spreadsheet, pardon me, everything but the spreadsheet, and we'll work on that. So this is the data that we're given at this point, and you can see that there's 89 records. We have 90 rows because we have that title row. And the first thing I want to do is, it's not very clean, easy to work with data, so I'm going to go ahead and create a table. So the way to do that, and your version of Excel might be slightly different. You might have to go up to your Insert menu and insert a table. In my case, I'm just going to go ahead and use the ribbon bar at the top here where I have an insert ribbon, and I want to go ahead and insert a table. And when I do that, it tries to figure out what data I want to put that table around, what data I want to use to make a table. And yeah, these are the rows that I want to use. And yes, I do have this checked off because my first row, as we mentioned, is the headers for the row. So I click OK, and this is what I have. It's a little hard to read up here. I'm just going to go ahead and change the font color so you can read it a little bit differently. We'll make it, let's make it white. Oh, you know what they have, yeah, no, there we go. So it's nice and easy to read now. Okay. Now we have tables, but what in fact I want to get to is I want to get to what's called a pivot table. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a pivot table, or if you're in the table ribbon, you can summarize with a pivot table. Both do the same thing. So I want to go ahead and insert a pivot table, and it says, you know, what table of data do you want? Well, I'm using this table 1 that I have. I'm going to go ahead and say OK, and it takes me and it opens up a brand new sheet at the bottom here. And in this sheet is what's called the pivot table, and over here is the little pivot table tool that we're going to use to build and work with some of the information. And what the pivot table does is it essentially summarizes the information for us based upon the criteria that we give it. So we have 89 pieces of 89 transactions or pieces of data, each containing within it a number of different fields. And I want to sort that data by whoever the listing salesperson was. So I'm just going to drag that from the available fields, which are just the headers of my rows, of my columns. I'm going to drag that down. I'm going to put it in rows. And you'll see what it does is it lists for me all of the agents who have done a transaction by representing a seller over the last 30 days. So all the information we pulled down, those 89 transactions that happened, there were 66 different listing agents involved. So obviously some have done more than one. The next thing I want to do is, beside that, I want to know how many trades each of them have done. So I'm going to grab the address and drag it down into values, which is this fourth box down here. And it's going to give me a count of the number of addresses that were assigned, that were a part of the same record or the same row on this other sheet, where this person was the listing agent number 1. So in this case, you'll see Adam had 1, Amy had 1, all the way down. We'll see that Hillary here had 2, Jane had 5, Kim had 3, So this tells you the number of people that, pardon me, the number of addresses that were associated with listings. So basically the number of trades they did. The next thing you want to do is you want to see what the average list price was for all of these trades for these people. So I drop list price down here, and what you'll see it does is that it sums or adds up all the list prices. So that's not a problem for the folks who have one trade next to them, but Hillary's we have 2, Jane's we have 5, Kim's we have 3, and what we wanted was the average. So I go back over to my tool here and I click on the little eye beside it, and that pulls up the ability to choose what I want to do with the numbers that I've just pulled in there. And I don't want to sum them. I don't want to count how many records there are because I've already done that with address. I want to go ahead and get the average of the totals that are in there. So now you'll see that Kim, who did 3 transactions, actually had an average of 354,500 for all of those. Next thing I want to do is I want to compare their list price to their sales price. So I'm going to do the same exercise here. Again, you see that over here on the right, I have the sum of all those sale prices. So her average was 354, and the total value that she sold was just over $1 million. So that wouldn't make sense to do any comparison. I've got to go ahead and click the eye again, do an average. And now I can see what their average sale price was. And at this point, I like to kind of tidy up the chart a bit. So I like having this centered. So I'm going to go ahead and center this. I like to have this, both of these columns in a dollar format. So I'm going to turn it into currency. And I don't need the pennies, the decimal points. So I'm just going to go ahead and change those for sure. So, and in fact, I sometimes like to center these as well, just so that I have a good look at it. So now we have the average sales price and the average list price. So, we can do an analysis on this by having Excel do some math for us, okay? And what we want to do is we want to, what's called insert a calculated field. So I'm on the home ribbon here. I want to go to the pivot table analyze ribbon, which is where you would default to if you were working in the pivot tables. And I want to go over to where it says fields, and I want to do what's called a calculated field. So I click on calculated field, and I want to call this list to sale ratio. Okay. And then I'm going to create a formula where it's doing math to tell me what the list to sale ratio is for each of these people in this time period, in this for the sales that they've done in the last 30 days. So the formula for list to sale ratio is simply you take the sale price of the home and you divide it by the list price of the home. So to start a formula in Excel, you always need the equal sign saying I need you to do some math. Then you tell it what the first part of the math equation is. The forward slash is the divider sign, and I want to do it, divide it by the list price. So I double click the list price and I click OK. And you can see it's returned the list to sale ratio, but it's returned it as a dollar amount, and that's not what I want. So I have to highlight the column and come back to our home menu, and I want to make that into a percentage. And so when I make that into a percentage, it makes more sense. And in fact, in this case, I might even go ahead and add a decimal point so that I can do a little more refined comparison. So when we go down the list, you can see that you can easily compare the list to sale ratio of all of your competitors out there. So again, let's go pick on someone that we have here. So Kim's average list price and her average sale price are exactly the same. So she's got a 100% list to sale ratio. Martha must have sold something that was new construction or multiple offers, because for this time period, her list to sale ratio is 107%. Whereas if we kind of carry on here, we could see that Sandra had one where she had negotiated a fair bit, and that resulted in a list to sale ratio of 85.1%. So quickly, you can do some math based upon who you're competing with, and then also at the very bottom, you can see the global numbers. So right now, for the last 30 days, the average list to sale ratio for everything that's sold for the entire board is 94.7%. So that's your average list to sale ratio right now. It's simply this number divided by this number. Okay? So that's how you use pivot tables. You can do it with a bunch of stuff. I'd encourage you to play around with it a little bit. Pivot tables are great. There's as many tutorials as you can possibly watch on YouTube. So I would encourage you to go to YouTube if you need help with that as well. If you have a different version of Excel than I have, you just need to figure out what version you have and make sure you include that when you do a search on YouTube. So I would say how to do pivot tables in Excel 2011, if that was the version that I had. So I'd encourage you to go to that. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message. I'm happy to answer them. Thanks, guys. Hope you have a great rest of your day.